The Blessed Mao by Anonymous. Those Christians who stand in need of heavenly aid cannot do better than apply themselves to Our Lady of All Help near Feu. In that place has been built expressly in her honor the very richest chapel ever yet raised for her by human hands. The whole inside is ornamented with golden images, and the belfry tower, which is made exactly like the one at Crasker, is perforated like a quimper fritter. There stands also near the church a stone fountain famed for healing the infirmities both of body and soul. It was at this chapel that Mao stopped on his road to pray. Mao came from Loprec, which is a pleasant little parish between Kaimerch and Lagoma. His friends and relations were all dead, and his guardian had sent him off to seek his living where he liked, with a good clubstick in his hand and 3 silver crowns in his purse. After saying devoutly at the foot of the high altar all the prayers he had ever learned from the cure or the old woman who had nursed him, Mao went out of church to go on his way. But as he passed the palisades, he saw a crowd of people gathered around a corpse upon the grass 48, and learnt upon inquiry that it was the body of a poor beggarman who had yielded up his soul the morning before, and who could not be buried for want of the money payment. Was he then a heathen or a wretched reprobate who had been unfaithful to his Christian duties, that no one will do him this charitable service? Asked Mao. He was a sheep of the true fold, replied one who stood by, and however hardly he might be pressed by hunger, he would not pluck the 3 apples or even ears of corn, which are permitted by old usage to be gathered by the passing stranger. But poor Stephen has not left the means of paying for his funeral, and so here he is allowed to lie. If I were not as poor myself, I would not have allowed him to lie here so long. Alas, cried Mao, are the people so cruel in this part of the world, that they suffer the poor to enter the church doors whilst living, but not after death? If money is all that is wanted, here are 3 crowns, they are all I have, but I will gladly give them to unlock holy ground to one of the faithful departed. The sexton and the priest were now sent for, and the body of the poor beggar was solemnly committed to the grave. As for Mao, he made a simple cross of 2 yew branches, set it on the grave of the poor beggar, and after having devoutly 49 repeated a de profundis, he set off once more upon his journey towards Campfront. After a time, however, Mao grew both hungry and thirsty, and remembering that he had nothing left of what his guardian had bestowed, he set himself to gather blackberries, wild sorrel, and sloes from the hedges, and whilst thus employed, he watched the birds that picked their living from the bushes, and said within himself, after all, these birds are better off than baptized creatures they have no need of. Inns of butchers, bakers, or gardeners, God's open sky belongs to them, and his earth is stretched before them like a table. Always spread the little insects are to them as game the grass, in seed their fields of corn, the fruit of the wild rose, or hawthorn their dessert. They are at liberty to gather all without payment or permission. Ask no wonder that the birds are joyous and sing from morning till night. Turning these thoughts in his mind, Mao slackened his pace, and at last sat himself down under the shade of an old oak tree, where he fell asleep. But behold, in his sleep, a holy man appeared suddenly before him, clad in shining raiment, who thus spoke. I am the poor beggar Stephen, for whom you purchased a consecrated grave. The blessed Virgin Mary, whom I endeavored to serve while on earth, now reckons me amongst her court, and 50 has vouchsafed to me the privilege of bringing you good news. Think not the birds of the air can possibly be happier than baptized creatures, for the Son of God has shed his blood for these, and they are the favorites of the Holy Trinity. And now hear what the 3 divine persons will do to recompense your piety. There stands hereabouts beyond the meadows an old manor house. You will know it by its weather vane, which is painted red and green. A man of rank dwells there, his name is Trehua, and he has a granddaughter lovely as the day and gentle as a newborn child. Go you and knock this evening at his door, saying that you are come. He knows for what he will receive you, and you will of your own self make out the rest. Only remember that if you are in want of help, you must say, Dead beggar, make haste to me, for I am sorely in need of thee. With these words, the holy man vanished, and Mao awoke. His first impulse was to thank God for vouchsafing such protection over him, and this done, he set off across the meadows to find the manor house. As night was coming on, he had some doubts of being able to do so, but at last he observed a flight of pigeons, which he set himself to follow, feeling certain they could only 51 lead him to the house of a noble. and in fact he soon perceived the redan green weather vane overtopping a little orchard of black cherry trees laden with fruit. For this was a part of the country famous for black cherries. It is from the mountain parishes that all those cherries are brought, which may be seen spread out on straw at the Leon festivals, and with which the young men fill their great beaver hats for the damsels of their choice. Mao crossed the lawn shaded with walnut trees, and then knocked at the most insignificant door he could find, saying, according to the directions, that he was come forth. He knew what the master of the house was soon fetched. He came, his head shaking, for he was old and feeble, and leaning on the arm of his fresh young granddaughter. To have seen them together, you would have thought of an old tottering wall supported by a blooming honeysuckle. The old gentleman and his granddaughter welcomed the young man with the greatest politeness. A worked ottoman was drawn for him close beside the grandfather's armchair, and he was treated with sweet cider whilst they waited for supper. Mao was much surprised to see the way in which he was received, and found great delight in watching the young girl, who prepared every 52 thing with tripping step, singing the while like a very lark. At last, when supper was over, and Lixinfer, so the old man called his grandchild, had cleared all away, he said to Mao, "We have treated you to the best of our ability, and according to our means, young man, though not according to our wishes, for the mansion of the Trehoirs has been long afflicted by a most grievous plague. Formerly, you might have counted 20 horses and full 40 cows here, but the evil spirit has taken possession of the stalls and stables. Cows and horses have disappeared one after another, and that as often as they have been replaced, until the whole of my savings have been thus consumed. All religious services to rid us of this destructive demon have hitherto failed. There has been nothing for us but to submit, and for want of cattle my whole domain now lies uncultivated. I had put some confidence in my nephew Maitland, who is gone to the war in France, but as he does not return, I have given notice throughout the country, both from the altar and elsewhere, that the man who can deliver the manor from this curse shall both marry Lixin and inherit my property after me. All those who have hitherto made the attempt by lying in wait in the stables have disappeared like the 53 cows and horses. I pray God that you may be more fortunate." Mao, whom the remembrance of his visions secured against all fear, replied that by the aid of the Blessed Virgin he hoped to triumph over the hidden foe. So begging that he might have a fire to keep him warm, he took his clubstick and went forth. The place to which he was conducted was a very large shed, divided in 2 parts for the use both of the cows and horses, but now all was empty from one end to the other, and the cobwebs hung in thick festoons from the racks. Mao kindled a fire of broom upon the broad paving stones and began to pray. The first quarter of an hour he heard nothing but the crackling of the flame. The second quarter of an hour he heard nothing but the wind that whistled mournfully through the broken door. The third quarter of an hour he heard nothing but the little death watch tapping in the rafters overhead. But the fourth quarter of an hour a dull sound rumbled beneath the pavement, and at the further end of the building, in the darkest corner, he saw the largest stone rise slowly up, and the head of a dragon coming from below. It was huge as a baker's kneading trough, flattened like a viper's, and all round the forehead shone a row of eyes of different colors, 54. The beast raised his 2 great forefeet, armed with scarlet claws, upon the edge of the pavement, glared upon Mao, and then crept hissing from his hole. As he came on, his scaly body could be seen unrolling from beneath the stone like a mighty cable from a ship's hold. Courageous as was the youth at this spectacle, his blood ran cold, and just as he began to feel the dragon's breath, he cried aloud, "Dead beggar, make haste to me, for I am sorely in need of thee." In an instant, the shining form he had invoked was at his side. "Fear nothing," said the saint. "Those who are protected by the Mother of God are always victorious over the monsters of the earth. Raise your club and lay the dragon dead at your feet." And with these words, he raised his hand, pronouncing some words that can only be heard in heaven. Mao aimed a fearful blow at the dragon's head, and that very moment the huge monster sank dead upon its sight. The next morning, when the sun rose, Mao went to awaken all the people at the manor and led them to the stables, but at sight of the dead monster, even the most courageous, started back at least 10 paces. "Do not be afraid," said the young man, "the Blessed Mother came to my assistance, and 55 the beast that fed on cattle and their guardians is nothing now but lifeless clay. Only fetch some ropes, and let us drag it from this place to some lonely waste." So they did as he desired, and when the dragon was drawn forth from his den, the whole length of his body was so great that it extended twice round the black wheat barn floor one. The old man, happy in his deliverance from so dangerous an enemy, fulfilled the promise he had made to Mao, and gave to him Lixen in marriage. She was led to church at Campfront, her left arm circled after the custom of the country by as many rows of silver lace as there were thousands of francs in her dowry, and the story goes that she had 18. As soon as he was married, Mao bought cattle, hired servants, and soon brought the land about the manor to a more flourishing condition than it had ever known before. Then went the grandfather to seek his recompense from God, and left all that he possessed to the young couple. So happy were they in each other and themselves that no baptized creature ever felt the like, so happy that when they knelt in prayer, they could think of nothing to request from God that 56 he had not already blessed them with, so they had nothing to do but to thank him. But one day, as they were sitting down to supper with their servants, one of their attendants introduced a soldier so tall that his head reached the rafters, and Lixen knew him for her cousin Maitland. He had come back from the French War to marry his cousin, and learning what had come to pass during his absence, he had felt the bitterest rage. Nevertheless, he betrayed nothing of his thoughts to Mao and his wife, for his was a deceitful heart. Mao, who suspected nothing, received him with affectionate kindness, set before him the best of everything in the house, had the handsomest room prepared for his reception, and went out to show him all the fields now ripe for harvest. But the higher Maitland saw the flax, and the heavier the ears of corn, the more he was enraged at not being the possessor of all this, to say nothing of his cousin Lixen, who had grown more charming than ever. So one day he proposed to Mao that they should hunt together on the downs of Lagoma, and thus contrived to lead him towards a distant heath where he had an old deserted windmill, against which bundles of furs for the baker's oven at Deiola's had been heaped up in great piles. When they reached this place, he 57 turned his face towards Campfront, and said suddenly to his young companion, "I can see the manor all this way off, with its great courtyard." "Which way?" asked Mao. "Behind that little beechwood. Don't you see the great hall windows?" "I am too short," said Mao. "You are right, so you are. And it is a pity too, for I can see my cousin Lixen in the little yard beside the garden." "Is she alone?" "No, there are some gentlemen, with her whispering in her ear." "And what is Lixen doing?" "Lixen is listening to them, while she twists her apron string." Mao raised himself upon the tips of his toes. "I wish I could see," said he. "Oh, it is easy enough," replied Maitland. "You have only to climb up to the top of the mill, and you will be higher than I am." Mao approved of this advice, and climbed up the old ladder. When he reached the top, his cousin asked him what he saw. "I see nothing but the trees, which seem as near the ground as wheat of 2 months' growth," said Mao, "and houses, looking in the distance, small as the seashells stranded on the shore 58. "Look nearer," returned Maitland. "Nearer, I can only see the ocean, with its boats skimming the water like seagulls." "Look nearer yet," said the soldier. "Still nearer is the common bright with rose blossoms and the purple heath." "Look down beneath you." "Beneath me," cried Mao in terror. "Instead of the ladder to descend by, I see flames rushing upwards to devour me." And he saw rightly, for Maitland had drawn away the ladder and set fire to the surrounding faggots, so that the old mill stood as in a furnace. Mao in vain besought the giant not to leave him there to perish in so horrible a manner. He only turned his back and went off whistling down them. Then the young man, feeling himself nearly suffocated, invoked the saint once more. "Dead beggar, make haste to me, for I am sorely in need of thee." Instantly the saint appeared, holding in his right hand a glittering rainbow, one end of which was resting on the sea, and in his left Jacob's mysterious ladder, that once led from heaven to earth. With the rainbow he put out the fire, and by the ladder's aid poor Mao reached the ground and went safely home. On beholding him, Maitland was seized with 59 surprise and consternation, sure that his cousin would hasten to denounce him before the magistrates, and rushing to fetch his arms, and Warhorse was hurrying from the courtyard, when Mao came to him and said, "Fear nothing, cousin, for no man saw what passed upon Deilah's common. Your heart was hurt, that God had given me more good things than yourself. I wish to heal its wounds from this day forward. So long as I live you shall share with me half of all that I possess save. And except my darling Lixen, so come my cousin harbor no more evil thoughts against me." The deed of this convention was drawn up by the notary in the usual form, and Maitland received henceforward every month the half of all the produce of the fields, the courtyard, and the stables. But this noble generosity of Mao served only to increase the spite and venom of his heart, for undeserved benefits are like wine drank. When one is not thirsteth, bring us neither joy nor profit. He did not wish Mao dead, because then he would have lost his share in Mao's wealth. But he hated him even as a caged wolf hates the hand that feeds him. What made him still more angry was to see how everything prospered with his cousin. To crown his felicity, he had a son born to him, both 60 strong and beautiful, and one that wept not at his birth. The nurses said Mao sent the news out to the first people of the neighborhood, entreating them to come to the baptismal feast, and they came from more than 6 leagues round, from Braspars, Keimerch, Loprec, Lagoma, Feu, Ervelac, and Saint Eloyal, mounted on handsomely equipped horses, with their wives or daughters behind them. The baptism of a prince of Cornwall himself could not have brought together a more goodly assembly. When all were drawn up ready in the front of the manor house, and Mao came to Lixen's chamber for the newborn babe, with those who were to hold it at the font, and his nearest friends, Maitland presented himself also with a traitor's joy depicted on his countenance. On seeing him the mother uttered a cry, but he approaching bent over her with specious words, and thanked her for the present she had made him. "What present?" asked the poor woman in surprise. "Have you not added a newborn infant to my cousin's wealth?" said the soldier. "Certainly," replied Lixen. "A parchment deed confirms to me," said Maitland, "half of everything Mao possesses save and except yourself, and I am consequently come to claim my share of the child's 61. All who were present uttered a great cry, but Maitland repeated calmly that he would have his half of the child, adding that if they refused it to him, he would take it himself, showing, as he spoke, a huge knife, which he had brought with him for the purpose. Mao and Lixen, in vain, with bended knees and folded hands, besought him to renounce his rights. The giant only answered by the whetting of his knife against the steel which dangled at his waist, and at last he was about to snatch the infant from its poor young mother's arms, when Mao all at once recalled the invocation to the dead beggar, and repeated it aloud. Scarcely had he finished, when the room was lighted with a heavenly radiance, and the saint appeared upon a shining cloud, the Virgin Mary at his side. "Behold me here, my friends," said the Mother of God, "called by my faithful servant from celestial glory, to come and decide between you." "If you are the Mother of God, save the child," cried Lixen. "If you are the Queen of Heaven, make them render me my dues," said Maitland audaciously. "Listen to me," said Mary. "You first, Mao, and you, Lixen, come near me with your newborn child. Till now I have given you the joys of life. I will do more, and give you for the future the delights of death. You shall follow me into 62, the paradise of my son, where neither griefs nor treachery nor sicknesses can enter. As for you, Goliath, you have a right to share the new benefit conferred on them, and you like them shall die, but only to go down 1,250 leagues below the surface of the earth, too, into the kingdom of the wicked one, whose servant you are." Saying these words, the Holy Mary raised her hand on high, and the giant was buried in a gulf of fire, whilst the young husband with his wife and child sank gently towards each other as in peaceful sleep, and disappeared borne upwards on a cloud. 63. 1. In many farms there is a small threshing floor reserved especially for black wheat. 2. This is the exact distance at which the Bretons define hell to lie.